in any country under a totalitarian government, if they feel that they are strong or you have an independent thinking, they see you as a threat. I was working in a small hospital in the south part of Eritrea, and I was sent to the capital, to Asmara. Until I arrived in Asmara, even I didn't know why I was arrested. First, I thought it was like a hospital. There were about 30 prisoners. Almost all of them were bandaged. And I said, "What happened to you?" And they told me they were tortured. And I said, "Why?" And they laughed. And they said, "Because that's why you are here." And I said, "No, it's not going to happen to me because I haven't done anything wrong." But after 4 or 5 days, I was also tortured. They tie your arm together. They make you sit, and they put a big log under your knee. Then when they lifted the log, you turn upside down. So they put your whole body in a ditch. So your feet is up over the ditch. So they start to hit you. The first night I was in prison, it was a small room, but we were 45, and there was no room for us to sleep. I said to them, "Do you want me to sing for you?" And they said, "Okay." So I sang a song, a gospel song. In the song it says, "When you look at me, I look like weak and miserable, but I'm happy, I'm strong, because I have Jesus in my heart." It was also a really hard time, but my faith started to grow. I knew it's better to be with faith than without faith when you are in a situation like that. I was born and brought up in Eritrea, in Asmara, in the city. There was war going on, the war for independence. So most of my life I spent in a war-torn country.
At one point they were a British protectorate for 10 years actually, and after that Ethiopia eventually bought Eritrea as a part of its country. So in 1951 the Eritreans took up arms and started fighting for independence, and it took 30 years before that happened. It was considered Africa's longest independence war. So the Eritrean War of Independence was eventually led by the EPLF, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, and they were led by Isaias Afwerki. So when Eritrea gained independence, he became the president of this new nation, and it was supposed to be a temporary situation. There's no constitution, there's no rule of law. The UN Commission described it as rule by fear, not by law, and that fear has been installed by Isaias Afwerki.
My family were always Protestant, so we were obliged to go to church. So I grew up in Sunday schools. After the independence, I got married. At that time, Eritrea was devastated by 30 years of war. So I thought I could do a lot. I joined a church. The church was doing a lot of good stuff in the villages. There were a lot of signs that the government didn't like what we were doing. For example, we had some of our, especially the village churches, they were always being persecuted. Some of our ministers or evangelists were arrested.
The whole fight for independence was about self-rule, it was about democracy, but with time people started realizing that this process was being delayed more and more, and that was the beginning of the conversations within, both within the government but also within the wider population about when are these elections going to be held, and also why is the government implementing more and more authoritarian policies.
In 2002 there was like a declaration. The government ordered all evangelicals and Pentecostal churches need to be registered. None of them got any registration. Even ordinary Christians were arrested. Some of them now are in prison for 17 years. A lot of them are my close friends. I knew them since I was a child. They want you to live in fear. There's always harassment from your bosses, from the community.
To have the worst record when it comes to press freedom in general. And this is not just limited to journalists, it's also applying to individuals. Since 2001, it's currently the only country in Africa without any independent media. Also has low internet access for people, and dissent is very heavily kind of forbidden, so they disappear, they get detained, or they have to leave the country out of fear for speaking out. There's only 4 sanctioned religions in Eritrea, and people who've been caught practicing in one of the religions that are outside of those 4 have been harassed, they've been detained, and many flee because of this persecution.
I was working for the church, and the government started to restrict our movement. So I got a scholarship with my family. Then I came here in 1999. Our initial plan was to stay for 2 years, but while I was here, the government shut the church. They started to also arrest some Christians, and at that time I extended my visa for 1 more year. I thought if things get better, I could go, but things start to get worse. So I decided to ask asylum. Then I was granted immediately. I remained since then. I worked in 3 places, in the church, in the prison, and also 2 or 3 days a week for Release Eritrea. Release Eritrea is a human rights organization. We are a group of Christians. We specialize on Christians, those who have been arrested for their faith, because we are all from the church. Initially, when we started Release Eritrea, sometimes they text you, call you to scare you. I have seen my name actually in the government's website several times. And sometimes they say he's an evangelical terrorist. Sometimes I work for CIA. Even when I go to Africa, mostly I have to travel secretly because they have their agents always. So I have to be careful. But Eritrea is unthinkable. So it is now 20 years since I was there. But I cannot go as long as this government is in power.
I guess one of the most terrifying aspects of what's happening in Eritrea, I guess beyond the immediate impact, is the future. The people who are being affected the most in Eritrea right now are young people. This is supposed to be the future of Eritrea. This is the generation, the first free generation after the War for Independence that was going to rebuild this country and make it into this, amazing country that everyone was fighting for. A few years ago, UNHCR said 5,000 people a month were fleeing. And then after the 2018 peace deal, the number increased massively when the borders opened between Eritrea and Ethiopia. And now recently, because of the war in Tigray, the numbers have gone down because it's just impossible to go through. In late November 2020, the conflict between the Ethiopian federal government and the Tigray regional government, the TPLF, broke out. And the Eritrean Defense Forces has been fighting on the Ethiopian federal government side ever since. I mean, since the conflict started, there's been very limited access to the region. So unfortunately, in the beginning, there was absolutely no access both to humanitarian organizations, but also to journalists and human rights organizations. We started getting a lot of terrible stories about what was happening on the ground. And many of the atrocities that we have documented have been committed by the Eritrean Defense Forces. There's massacres that have happened, but there's also reports about rape and sexual violence that are prevalent throughout the region, and they're coming out more and more.
The government is doing now even worse in Ethiopia, in Tigray. So when the war broke out, they went with a full force. 40 army divisions went to Tigray, and they were destroying everything. They were killing animals, looting, raping women, and it was really awful, especially as an Eritrean. For me, it was a big shame. I was really heartbroken when I hear all these atrocities. These are the people whom we know. The people who've been murdered, I know them. The people who are murdering also, I know them. So both people are my brothers. We speak the same language. The Eritrean dictator is the master for all these atrocities. So this also saddens my heart. I don't think that the government is going to last. With all these crimes, with all these injustices, I hope one day I will see him in the criminal court. Justice needs to be done. So I don't think that it will last long now. That's my hope.